Hello everyone and welcome to this video. Today I'm going to show you how to create an Azure Bastion resource so that you can connect to your virtual machines without the need for them to have any public IP addresses or any ports open through a network security group. I'm also going to show you how to create a NAT gateway so that all of your internet traffic will flow through that NAT gateway from your virtual machines. So let's get started. The first thing I want to do is create a resource group. If you have a resource group already, you are welcome to use that. I'm going to create everything from scratch just so that we have one standard area to put everything in. I am going to name this resource group Bastion RG. I'm going to put it in the East US2, just my preference. You can put it wherever you like. I'm not going to create any tags for this. This shouldn't take too long to create. There it is. Perfect. So now we have a resource group. The next thing I'm going to do is create an address space. And that will be in our virtual network resource. I am going to call this one just Bastion VNet. Going to keep it in the East US2. You can keep the default address space. I like to delete it. I like to create my own just to get myself some experience with CIDR ranges. I'm going to create 10.30.100.0/22. This should give me a little over 1,000 usable IPs. There you go. I am also going to add a subnet for my servers, which will just be my LinkedIn virtual machines. I'm going to give this a 10.30.100.0/22. That should give me about 24. That should give me 251 IP addresses. Perfect. Let's go to security. Here is where you could create a Bastion host. I want to do this from scratch so that I can show you exactly how to do it, rather than letting Azure do it for you. So we're going to disable that for now. I'm not going to give it any tags, and I'm going to create it. This might take a minute or two. There we go. That was fast. If we connect to our address space here, we'll see that we have 10.30.100.0/22. If we look at our subnets, we have our server subnet. Now, what I want to do is create an Azure Bastion subnet because you have to name it Azure Bastion subnet so that it will recognize what it is. I am going to give it a 101.0/27 IP range. This will give it about 27 IP addresses to use. That should be plenty for what we're going to do. Make sure I name it correctly, otherwise it won't work. Let's save that. I'm also going to create a NAT Gateway subnet just to get that out of the way. That can be called anything you want. Let's just name it NAT Gateway subnet. We are going to put this in the 101, and we'll put this in 32 and make this a 29. That way we can continue on using the 101 subnet, but that way we're not wasting any space for IP addresses. Let's save that. Perfect. That's created. Now, I'm going to create a NAT gateway first, and then we will create the Bastion resource. There we go. We are going to keep it in our Bastion RG, which is our resource group. We can name this anything we want. I'll just call it NAT Gateway 01. We are going to create a new public IP address. I'll just make this NAT GW-IP. One thing to note is the NAT Gateway will automatically create a standard static public IP address. When we create the Bastion resource, it will also create a standard static IP address. One thing that we want to be aware of is the Bastion resource can only use those types of IP addresses, and if you try to put it in a resource group where you have a basic dynamic IP, it won't let you do that. Let's click OK. Click Next. We're going to put it in the Bastion VNet gateway for the NAT gateway that we created. I don't want to give it any tags. I don't need that right now. Let's create that. That might take a few minutes to create. While we create that, I am also going to create a servers, a network security group for my server's subnet. Network security group. That way I don't have to give a network security group to each of my individual virtual machines. I will just name this servers NSG. Keep it in East US 2. I don't need to create any tags. Perfect. This should not take too long to create, and then once it's created, we will attach that network security group to the server's subnet. So if we click subnets, associate, go to our virtual network, our subnet for servers, click OK. We'll keep everything as default for inbound security rules right now, which right now is just allowing pretty much nothing in except our virtual networks inside our Azure network, and then outbound is allowing pretty much everything outbound. Now, let's create our Bastion resource. This is very easy to create. We'll put it in our Bastion resource group. We will just name this one Bastion 01. I'm not very good with names, sorry everyone. Virtual network, and it's already going to choose the Azure Bastion subnet since that's what it needs. Public IP address, we'll create a new one. We'll let it just name it Bastion VNet IP. So standard static is what it has to be. There's no way to choose anything else. Don't need tags as usual. Let's create that. So right now what we've done is we've created a resource group. We've created a address space with a server subnet to put our Windows and Linux VM in that we're going to test. We've created a Azure Bastion subnet to put our Bastion subnet, Bastion server in, the resource, and also a NAT Gateway subnet. And then we've created the Bastion resource and the NAT Gateway resource. That will take a few minutes to create. While we do that, let us quickly add a Linux and Windows virtual machine. I'm going to keep everything at default just because it's a lot easier to create that way. But you can create what you want. I'll just call it Web01. Doesn't really matter. Give it a username and a password. Let's see if I did that correctly. Do they match? Nope, don't match. So let's change this one. Well, I'm having a hard time with this password, am I? Perfect, there we go. All right. I'm going to put none to show you that it will still work with the Azure Bastion VM. Disks are fine. I want to create this in the server subnet. Make sure you change that. I do not want a public IP address. We do not need a security group because we've added one already to the subnet of servers. I'll keep this all default. No tags. And while that one is being created, we will also create our Linux virtual machine. We're just going to create an Ubuntu server. We'll just call this one web02. I'm not really putting anything web on there. I'm just using any type of name. I'm going to do a password instead of a public key for now. Makes it a little bit easier just for testing purposes. Perfect. We don't need any ports to be opened. Disks will keep default. Networking, we want to change this to the servers. Come on, server, subnet, there we go. We do not need public IP address. We do not need a network security group. This might take a couple minutes. Perfect. Now, if we go into our resource groups, and we look at our Bastion resource group, we have everything that we need. We have our Bastion resource, we have our NAT Gateway resource, we have our servers, which it's still creating the Linux machine, but we have our Windows machine up and running. And then of course we have our public IP addresses for our Bastion virtual machine, resource, and our NAT Gateway. So let's connect to our Windows virtual machine using Bastion. So if you're inside the virtual machine, select Connect, Bastion, use Bastion. Let's put in our username and password that we created earlier. We'll click Connect, and it should start loading up our Windows machine. Now, while this loads up, let's go back to our network security group just to show you that inbound rules, we do not have any port 3389, and our Linux machine doesn't have any port 22 open. This is all connecting through that Bastion resource. What I like to do here, because I want to show you before we do the NAT Gateway side, let me take off this enhanced security configuration for Internet Explorer. What I want to show you is, let's just go to ifconfig.me. So you'll see, even though you do have an internet connection, it's using a different IP address than the network gateway. All right, so we have a 40.84.43.209. Let's go to our virtual network, and I want to attach that gateway, that NAT gateway, to our server's subnet. So that's very easy to do. Just select your virtual network, your subnets settings, your server subnet, or whatever you name the subnet. Click NAT Gateway, click Save. Once that saves, we'll refresh our page. Let's see how long it takes. There it is, different IP address, 52.167.251.75. And just to show you that that is the gateway, we'll go to public IP addresses, NAT Gateway public IP address, and there you are, 52.167.251.75, which is right here. Okay, and now let's connect our Linux VM using Bastion. We'll do the same process that we did with the Windows virtual machine. Okay. There we are. And let's just see if we have internet access. There we go. And we're all set. Now this internet access is also going through the NAT Gateway since they're both on the same subnet. Now, you may ask, what do you want to do that for? Maybe you want to push everything through one specific set of IP addresses. You can put a proxy in between the two if you need to later on for security purposes, web filtering purposes, etc. But this is how you would create a Bastion resource, a NAT Gateway, as well as a Linux and Windows virtual machine and an address space. All right, I hope you all learned something. I'm going to create some more videos soon, and I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you.